What can I say about Ghostbusters that hasn't already been said? I mean, it's a touchstone. It's the corner of the pop culture zeitgeist. It's so much to so many people. No, wait. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Not that. No. Not that Ghostbusters movie. We're talking about Ghostbusters 1984. That was directed by Ivan Reitman. It was written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis. I grew up with this movie. This movie is so amazing. It's in my head, and I have to watch it every couple of years. Few movies have that effect on me. Few movies make me want to rewatch it, like the first John Wick movie or Nightmare Before Christmas. Movies like that. Back to the Future is one of those movies. It's just, you can't not watch these movies. If they're on TV, you stop and you put it on in the background maybe, but it is there and it is part of you. The original Ghostbusters movie is one of those cult classic that almost everyone who's seen it agrees is just universally good. Its catchphrases and one-liners have joined the pop culture zeitgeist and have been forever cemented in our minds due to a staggering overuse of those particular lines. Not to mention the good old 80s boom that saw pretty much everything getting its own toy line. Animated cartoons, mass merchandising. Ghostbusters was no different, except the fact that everyone didn't think this movie would work. Dan Aykroyd even thought that this movie would be cool, but no one thought this movie was going to reach the heights that it reached. It shot for $30 million and it pulled in over $300 million. So when it's all said and done, is Ghostbusters as good as we remember, or should it be tossed in the trash heap? Should it deserve that 97% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes? I mean, I think so. Let's get into it. We need a heading here for the story thus far, or so far. Venkman, Ray, Egon, Winston, which we'll get into in a second. This is Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and of course Ernie Hudson. These guys all get together as a quartet of Ghostbusters. Well, I guess three of them really. Let's wind back the clock a little bit and talk a bit about what happens. So when their government grant runs out, the former three men go into business as the Ghostbusters after a run-in with a real-life ghost at a Manhattan library, basically. Later, they end up having to hire on Ernie Hudson, as we were saying, Winston, to assist them because the work just gets and help is needed. Armed with unlicensed nuclear accelerators, the team is spectacularly successful, ridding the Big Apple of ghosts and long-legged beasties. Well, for a while. Tight-lipped bureaucrat William Dick Atherton regards the Ghostbusters as a bunch of charlatans, but is forced to eat his words when New York is besieged by an army of unfriendly spirits he accidentally releases whilst trying to shut down the Ghostbusters, because he's a dick. That is a joke from the film. It's a good joke. I like that joke. His stupidity leads to a long-dead Babylonian demon, Goza, coming forth to our dimension with help from the Keymaster and the Gatekeeper that are channeled through beautiful cellist Sigourney Weaver and nerdish Rick Moranis. Yeah, I know, right? Don't worry, we'll get into the character names and the backgrounds for them later. The movie is a comedy sci-fi at its core, being all about demonic, cult, paranormal forces lurking out of the shadows to claim back a world that it once had a stranglehold on and has hinted at a repeating situation. Ghostbusters have to stop Gozer. Title: The Characters. First up is the compelling, no serious arc to the story. I know, that it sounds really weird, but there's a lot to unpack here in this movie, and it's just so bizarre. I don't know how this movie made any money at all. Venkman, Ray, Winston, and Egon, they don't change by the end of the film. Our heroes don't grow as characters. They don't learn anything from this story at all. Something we're all used to from modern movies is showing the hero's progress to make you feel somehow attached to those heroes. And that's not a correct assumption. This movie certainly proved that you don't need that to make a good movie, to be entertaining, to be fun. But we should probably talk about the elephant in the room, because there's an elephant over there, and it's a big elephant, and it's not great, and it's called Peter Venkman. Oh boy, where do we start with the fraudster? So the comedy hook is actually played almost exclusively by Bill Murray. His timing is impeccable as always. And I believe that he wouldn't be nearly as famous had it not had been for this role, which I know is a big call, but I think it's the right one, to be honest. He is a sleaze in this movie. He's so skeevy that rewatching this film, his character feels like an undersexed womanizer with an ultimate goal of just getting laid, I guess. Look, even our first introduction to his character as Venkman is with a pretty blonde lady and a squirrely, nerdy-looking male conducting psychic evaluation tests by using blind cards, allowing the lady to cheat and not shocking her for incorrect answers, but instead shocking the poor fellow for incorrect guesses even when he's right. In the 80s, this was fine, this was funny, right? Venkman being a sleaze was not meant in the way that we see it today, what with a whole bunch of movements that would prevent something like this happening, I feel, in a story today, which is absolutely above board, and I can't believe how messy the 80s was when it came to women's rights. To be honest, the 80s were just so skeevy. It was just horrible. At the end of the scene, he invites her to dinner because of course he does, he just wants to get laid. You kind of get this feeling that he doesn't think anything is totally legit. Even when he sees a ghost in the opening of the movie with his own eyes, he doesn't carry that belief. He doesn't feel like he carries that belief. And for him, it just feels like, hey, we could make money. This is how we could do it without having to, have actual jobs. Throughout the whole movie, he just wants to pretty much get laid. And here's the thing. Who the hell brings Thorazine on a date? This scene where Venkman goes to Sigourney's house to pick her up for the date, or apartment, I guess, and she's possessed. So he puts her to sleep with Thorazine. Look, in saying that, he also has some of the best lines in the film. Insert one here. And I can't overstate his delivery of a number of well-timed zingers, even though that they are quite flat. They're so good. They just make you laugh out loud. Also, this movie feels a lot like a vehicle for Bill Murray to just constantly say witty and sarcastic things, and that just fills me with all sorts of joy. Ray stance. Some men, like me, never grow up. Ray seems to be that type of man. Lives in his parents' home that they left him when they died. You kind of get the feeling that Ray is very much a trust fund kid. He's fairly innocent and childlike, but he's portrayed as being a brilliant scientist, and he plays the socially awkward intellectual to a T, which is kind of weird when you see him these days and he's kind of crazy, or crystal head vodka and aliens are real. That's a thing. At one point, Ray says that they worked in the private sector and they expect results, alluding to a history before that he had a government grant at the university, which we really don't find out much about at all. But we also kind of get this feeling that before the government grant, that he actually had some other job within the private sector. Egon Spengler. Egon actually describes himself better than I can ever do it. Spengler states that he collects spores, molds, and fungus, and claims that, as a child, the only toy that he ever had was quote-unquote part of a slinky, which he straightened out. Spengler also implies that he is a sugar junkie due to his affection for sweets and candy. In his interaction with Secretary Janine and the others of the team, Spengler is an extremely smart person, but amazingly socially awkward and stiff, not unlike myself. Winston Zeddemore. Whereas Peter, Ray, and Egon are all scientists and believe in the occult to a certain point, Winston is a complete and utter non-believer. He's there to get his job and get a steady paycheck, and that's it. The great writing here shines through as he blatantly states this during the interview with Janine, that he doesn't believe it, but he'll believe anything as long as a steady paycheck. The other thing about this is that Winston Zeddemore was going to be actually a bigger character and was actually rewritten. When Eddie Murphy turned down the role. Eddie Murphy was going to be in this, but I think instead he did like Beverly Hills Cop or something, or Coming to America, I don't know. Holy crap, would this have been different if Eddie Murphy had have been one of the title characters, and one of the other guys would have been written into the background, probably Dan Aykroyd, and then this movie would have been trash to have Dan Aykroyd in the background, which is weird, because again, Crystal had vodka and aliens. What the hell are you doing? What, Dan, what are you doing? Lewis Tully. Rick Moranis is a master comedian. Well, I mean, he used to be. I'm sure he still is. We haven't seen him in much for a very long time. He's such a master in this that I can't even think of any role that he's played where he doesn't seem so damn natural. Even as a tax accountant nerd loser who just seems to have no real friends and has very low social skills. Lewis is Dana's neighbour. Dana being, of course, Sigourney Weaver. And she just looks so hot throughout this movie all the time. I mean, she's hot now. She was hot then. She's always been hot. But in this, she's so hot. So Lewis very much wants to get friendly with Dana, constantly inviting her to parties and harassing her in the hallway. She clearly sees him as no threat at all. But it's obvious that he doesn't take any hints and that she just isn't interested. Dana Barrett. Oh, Sigourney Weaver. The first time I saw Sigourney Weaver was in Aliens, and my goodness, she just first tweets. Sigourney Weaver is one of, if not the best actor? What are we calling people these days? Just actor? Okay, at our time, Ghostbusters was her comedy movie. She'd been playing basically a lot of dramatic roles for a long time and wanted to show another side of her talent. Not only did that happen, but we also got to see her play a possessed person, and it's just amazing. She plays the part so well, it's hard to tell if she's playing the role or truly just absorbed a spirit into her. Next title, this film isn't for children. Back in the time that this film came out, executives haven't yet come to grips with the fact that young adults and children were the majority of cinema audiences. I know how that sounds, but it was likely because those execs were just too busy sniffing a whole lot of coke and driving their Porsche 911s. The 80s, it was a bunch of adults doing drugs and driving fast cars. And yet, we all think of this as a kid's movie, despite the theme of monsters versus lasers. But this movie was made as a big budget summer blockbuster that almost everyone thought would flop. It covers sex. Ghost sex. Yes, apparently there was a longer ghost going down sex scene thingy too, which I'm sure is out there. Smoking. Starting a business. Dating. Legal troubles. Red tape. I'm also going to call date rape here as well because of the whole thing with the Sigourney Weaver being possessed, and why would you bring... Anyway, it's weird. But it was an aftermarket bevy of items aimed at us kids. The animated series and all that merch was squarely targeted as kids, but this is not a kids movie. The score is amazing. I didn't really have space in this video, but the music of Ghostbusters is simply amazing. A mix of theater and movie score and pop culture music. Who you gonna call? Apparently, court case because you stole some of your track from somebody else. Yeah, right. Number one hit record. That's fine. But I mean, it still holds up to this day. Next title. But there are problems that age the film. Alright, so there are some things that just make me a bit cringy with this, to be honest. The first one is the ghost blowjob dream. I mean, it's pretty funny, but it doesn't really fit the film, and it feels like some sort of weird sexual fantasy joke. Ray is fairly interested in kink, but wanting to hide it, so we don't actually know that part of the background, I guess. It's only touched on in this one scene, and it really didn't need to actually be here. Venkman still comes off as a misogynist, womanizing trash bag, and given today's climate of Me Too and its time, this is extremely problematic for this film. It should have been problematic then, but back then it was basically looked at as funny. I'm not sure how Murray managed to play the role and make it feel so much not as creepy as it is, but it's really creepy. The stop motion and the hellhounds is the actual literal worst in this movie. It really takes you out of the film. It's interesting that all the ghost scenes are so amazingly crafted and shot on the highest quality film to make them as realistically as possible. And then some idiot decides stop motion use is a good idea for the hellhounds. Maybe don't even include the hellhounds. You didn't need them. Maybe that should have just been some Henson puppets, some actual puppets, but I doubt that would have been very cheap even back then. But, I mean, could be. Looking back on the ghosts, it's never really explained why there are both human and monster ghosts. Like, Slimer himself seems to be some sort of fat blob ghost, but it's never explained the hierarchy of the ghosts or, the decision behind that. It's never really comes across in the film at all. In closing, with all that said and done, Ghostbusters is still a marvel of a film. It's a romp. It's a work of genius that can never be recaptured no matter how many times they've tried it. Yes, new Ghostbusters, we know you're there, okay? You tried, you failed. You were essentially a reboot that no one wanted. And then when we came to terms with the fact that it was happening and we were excited, you still let us down with really terrible writing. Really bad writing. Please don't. The comic timing in Ghostbusters 1984 is superb. The entire cast makes for one of the most captivating and funny comedy films that we've ever seen. Do yourself a favor, grab some soda, some popcorn, and a comfy couch, and watch this movie.